Alright everybody, welcome back to another episode of Wicked New England. I hope you caught John drinking, because I think he was trying to do it before we started the episode. But you know what? Surprise! Alright guys, so my co-hosts, as always...
John.
I'm Anthony.
Alright. They're the best. They really are. Okay, my name's Andrew. If you don't know that by now, you're probably never going to know. And that breaks my heart. Just a little bit. So today we're going to be talking about something that tastes great. Is itchy, tasty. Cannibalism. Not zombies, I promise. But cannibalism. Yes. Cannibalism, folks, is people who eat other people. The urge was coming on. Stop that. So, I actually tasked everybody to research a tale of cannibalism that existed in our history. So, I went the easy route, like the uncultured swine that I am, and I picked the Donner Party, because everybody knows that, right? So let's talk about it just a little bit. Let's get into it. So the Donner Party, just kind of quick overview, was a tasty tale about an expedition gone wrong and how the will to survive can drive you to do things you never thought you could, like chewing on John. You know, I think he's got more meat on his bones than Anthony. So me and Anthony would eat him. He'd be the first to go. The meatiest is the first.
Hey.
Shut up.
Yeah, I'll stop.
Stop where you are. I am Fluffy. We don't need to acknowledge it. Okay? And then we move on to our delicious voyage. Ravenous. Okay, so originating in Springfield, that's Missouri, not Massachusetts, even though we are in New England, and eventually departing from Independence, Missouri, the Donners were a pioneer party that took a 4 to 6 month journey over the U.S. and Rockies towards California. Many mishaps and a bad choice in paths resulted in a snowbound winter holed up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. The ending result was 48 of the 87 members surviving. You can guess what happened to the rest of them. They became leftovers. Some of them died from disease, some of them died from injuries sustained. Actually, surprisingly enough, with all the cannibalism, only 2 of them were actually murdered for that purpose. Coincidentally, it was both the Native American guides who had gotten them lost. I think they were a little bitter, folks. So now the chewy details. In short, they got hungry. What do you do when you're hungry? You eat. Anything, sometimes people. Bad decisions and the Hastings cut off. A shortcut, or so they thought. They got some bum information, we'll say. Left them without enough supplies, and they resorted to eating the sick and the dead. And they also murdered their 2 Native American guides to fill their stomachs. And they were good eating.
Skill issue.
Yes. But in closing, so they got some bum advice. A jerk with a general store tried to conceal the true reality of that advice because he wanted to make more sales. Capitalism. They came to turmoil with each other, split their group up into 2 different paths, got delayed by a month, and were SOL with bad weather and no food. So, I asked, what would you do? I myself can tell you, as like grisly as it may sound, life is preferable to death. And so in that situation, I would rather eat a human than die. Hopefully not you. I like you. You're my viewers. I want to keep you around. You watch my videos. This is getting weird. Okay. So, the only other thing I really wanted to show you, folks, if you look at this map, it's the little squiggly yellow line there by Salt Lake. That's the Hastings Cutoff, which actually takes you through the middle of the mountains, where if they just stuck to the original Oregon Trail, which hooked up to the California Trail, they would actually went a little bit further north, but they would have went around the mountain range, which would have been smart. But they went the other way because some jerk with a general store said, "I'm making some extra dollars this month." No, you definitely want to take that way.
Dude,
Personally, I think that guy should have been found, strung up in the middle of the town, and killed in front of everybody, and not just hung, like gutted and disemboweled for everybody to see.
2020, you can't blame him.
Seriously?
No, you can't.
Knowingly knew he was sending them to the middle of the mountain range, knowing they were short on supplies. After getting ravaged by Native Americans, I might add, too, because that's where all their food went. They literally got robbed. They got held up and fucking robbed and sent into the mountains for the winter. Like, what would you do? I guess you could line up and die, but I mean, you know how slow that is to just, like, lay there in the cold and, like, wait for hypothermia to take you into a sleep?
See,
Forget that noise.
I do not like the idea of just waiting for death. That's horrifying, to be completely honest.
Yeah, forget that. Nah. I'm gonna chew on someone's leg You start on the calf. It's nice and
Preferably,
muscly. It's like a steak. You just
no
fillet
murder.
it. Little calf muscle action.
Preferably no murder involved. But
No murder. Plenty of people are going to die anyway, because
Yeah.
the ones who refuse to eat, they're going to starve. The only problem is then, if they don't die fast enough, the meat goes with the starvation. They thin out.
But
You
you'd
know,
have something. You'd have
Yeah.
something. It's not much, but
But
it's
is it
something.
okay to kill, like, the fattest one of the group? Like, what if that's like Christmas time? And it's like your Christmas goose.
So that's a good question.
Do we remember Lord of the Flies and Piggy eating all the food, threw the boulder on him? Come on now. We all read it. We all read it in school. Maybe you saw the movie. Just saying. You always take out the fat kid.
But would I do it,
And he had
or
the
would I
glasses to
hire
make
someone
fire.
else to do it?
How are you going to hire him? You got no food. Even if you have a box full of money, everybody's starving. They don't care about your
Well,
gold.
like,
They want the last Snickers bar in the tent. You know what I mean?
I'll give
Like,
him my leather shoes. Have something to chew on. You know?
folks, some days it's just not worth chewing through the leather straps in the morning. If you know what I mean, stay tuned. Okay, so on that, I'm going to end my little bit of a spiel, and I'm going to pass the mic off over to these two guys. I'm going to shut up for a little while.
You want me to go first? All right. Well, guys, unfortunately, I decided, again, with my wonderful world of history, to go to World War II with this one. I did find some interesting stories, and unfortunately, these are somewhat very tragic stories when you're looking at it. And as I'm reading this, I'm not saying anything bad about cultures or beliefs. These are just the torturous things that people went through between having a little bit of a devilish mind in an aspect, as well as feeling like you have no choice but trying to survival of the fittest aspect as well. And during World War II, there were a couple of cases of cannibalism by the Japanese military. Now, these Japanese military personnel had to go through war crime tribunals, and that's where a lot of this information was discovered. One such case was Chichewing Island, and that's a case where a bomber group of 9 men crash landed on the island. One managed to escape. Apparently he managed to get out of the plane. It was just offshore on the island, and he managed to escape in a life raft. The rest of the crew got captured. 4 of the men were pretty much brutally tortured and killed. Some of them speared, so to speak. They did a lot of torturous things with them, and 4 of the men were actually butchered for meat. They took the meat from the legs and even the liver. Now, there are other cases of this as well in other prison camps throughout the Philippine Islands that Japan had taken over and taken control of. But this particular case I wanted to talk about because it has an interesting little story to it. Now, they did everything with the leg meat and the liver, and they carefully prepared it almost like a delicacy. They served it with vegetables, rice, and they fed it to the Japanese officers.
I think you're looking good.
Now, as far as this case, of what makes it interesting is the story of the one that got away. The one that got away ended up becoming our 41st president of the United States, George H.W. Bush.
Wow. That just blew my mind.
Crazy.
That blew my mind.
That's
Now,
crazy.
this is a story that I did come across during my research for this podcast, and that's why I wanted to bring this particular story up.
Just
But
think
that
of how
was,
close that guy was to being somebody's dinner.
Wow.
and we know, and he probably, and if he wasn't going to be the 41st president, who would have been the 41st president of the United States at that time?
Who did run against Bush? And
We're going to have to look that one up. But anyway, while he's looking that up, I just explained something that was going on the Pacific end of the war, but there was also a tragedy in the Atlantic side of the war as well. And that is the city of Leningrad in Russia. During the Battle of Leningrad, Germany actually surrounded the city in 1941, and they cut off all supply lines to the city. And that was basically Germany's way of trying to take the easy way out of having to have this long, drawn-out war, having to fight to the death. They were just going to sit there, keep bombing them slowly but surely, and let them starve each other out or make them surrender by any way, shape, or form. During this case, they actually had successfully bombed Leningrad's food storage. So they were short on rations, and it got kind of very scary as well because you had people dying on the streets. They were eating everything from the family pet to the horses, the cattle. Once there was no food, they were pretty much screwed. They started resorting into eating people that were dying on the side of the road. There's also a report that a mother killed and served up her child. I believe it was baby, maybe 18 months, I believe. And that was mainly to help her as well as her other 3 children live as well.
Well, not to be macabre, but that is the bear mentality. I mean, bears will eat their cubs because
now,
you can have more, but...
In another aspect of this whole thing, I do want to say that in the tribunals from both the Pacific side as well as the Russian side of the things, during Leningrad, it was actually bad enough where the police force actually had a cannibalism task force to try to stop and prevent the cannibalism. That's how bad things were on that aspect. But both sides, both countries, they did end up going after people that were found guilty of committing that act, and these individuals were also executed as well. So it's, for the Pacific aspect, I think that's kind of a war crime aspect. For the Russian aspect, that's more survival of the fittest. I get it, I understand it, but this is kind of looking at both sides of the evilness of cannibalism, as well as how far would you be willing to go to survive?
Eat a human.
I mean, this is basically what it comes down to. And when you look at war crimes, is it really a war crime if you're just trying to survive? When the Japanese soldiers were doing this, they weren't doing it because they needed the food. They had food supplies. They were doing it as torture. And there was something specific. I did not make it in the note. I was looking for it. But there was something specific because they would mainly go after the person's liver. And I believe it was because they believed that consumption of one's liver will give them the strength and the knowledge. So, I mean, there's different aspects to look at things, but I mean, this one's kind of a little bit touchy, especially when you hear of the child's aspects as well. There was a lot of different cases going on behind the scenes, but yeah, the Russian background, they do have a history of cannibalistic acts. And that's why during this time, I think they took it very, very seriously. No, we're not having this to death. They basically hung them. I believe there might have been a few cases where it was shot by firing squad. I'm not sure. Most of these individuals were all basically hung though. So it was executed for committing the crime of cannibalism. So that's just showing that there is strong consideration for punishment for such acts.
Damn. That, you had such like a fun tone about it, and then you just...
Sorry, I didn't mean to kill the tone. Out of curiosity, did you find out who was running against George Bush?
Massachusetts' own governor, Michael Dukakis.
I don't remember that race.
Well, the Republican one.
Just did.
All right. Who knew? I didn't.
I didn't either, to be completely honest. I don't even know if I pronounced his name right.
You did. Anyway.
Do you think human flesh needs salt and pepper?
Yeah, I mean, like, well, if you like salt and pepper on your meat, I would assume so.
You always have to season your meat.
Well, you don't always. If you're starving, probably not. Unless you're sitting there thinking to yourself, you know...
Fun fact.
I could just have this food quicker.
Fun fact.
Or I could season this.
Back in the day, and this might have come from cowboy times, actually. Not particularly sure. But you can actually season your beef with gunpowder. Fun fact. That's a thing.
Is it good?
I wasn't alive then, so I never really tried it. But I believe this came from Western times, and cowboys would actually do that. They would cut open one of their bullets, and they would actually season their beef with gunpowder before they grilled it or roasted it over the flame.
Does it lower your life expectancy?
No. It's perfectly, I won't say healthy, but it's good enough for you that it's not going to cause you any harm.
If you guys want to watch us season our meat with gunpowder,
I am open for an experiment
That
on this
would be
level
very
because
fun.
I know health-wise it wouldn't do anything to kill me. So
I was going to say, if
Um,
anything, you're going to cook it all off when you put it over an open flame.
that's what I'm saying, but it leaves it with a different, like, because the residue. leaves it
Yeah,
with
it's more
flavor.
probably like a smoky taste.
like a
I would
smoky
think.
ash. Yeah.
so if you want to see that, drop it in the comments. Say, eat the gunpowder.
I got a little.
I'm not eating gunpowder straight. I'll put it on meat, cook it,
We'll
on
put it
an
on the
open
steak.
flame,
We'll put it on a
and
steak.
then we'll do it.
We'll just
but-
get one steak. We'll season it with gunpowder. We'll grill it outside.
Tomahawk steak.
We're doing
That
it
way
outside.
We'll all chip in, get a tomahawk steak. I really like tomahawk steak.
Anyway,
He likes
guys,
paying for the bone.
let's kind of get a little bit back on topic here, John.
So, we're gonna be bringing this to the Americas, or back to the Americas.
Both of
Basically,
them, or just one?
North America.
What about Central?
Didn't happen there.
Okay.
Sorry.
He said Americas.
It's okay. So anywho, the Jamestown settlement. So essentially, a little bit of background. In 1609, the winter of that year was extremely bad, and it was called the Starving Time. So, at the time, or I guess afterwards, we found documents of people talking about cannibalism during the Starving Time. So essentially, we didn't have any proof until rather recently. Well, I guess maybe not super recently, but compared to 1600s, very recently. In 2013, researchers from the Smithsonian found physical evidence of cannibalism in the Jamestown settlement around 1609. And so, back to my notes.
I like when you pull down your glasses like that librarian look. That's makes it very smart.
Thank you. So in 2013, researchers from the Smithsonian presented evidence that cannibalism occurred during the harsh winter of 1609. Prior to hard evidence being found, there were documents and letters which referenced eating the dead, such as from George Percy. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, George Percy? I've never heard of that guy.
Who is that?
Who is it?
He was the president of the colony during the Starving Time, in which he talked about digging up the graves of dead settlers to eat the corpses. Now, there's evidence that a 14-year-old
Whoa.
girl,
Hold on. Before you continue, they dug up the graves to eat the dead?
according to his letter,
So they're not eating fresh dead. They're eating like slightly decomposed dead.
oh, it gets worse. So essentially, in his letter, or one of his letters, he was talking about the Starving Time. In the letters, he talked about digging up graves to eat the corpses, as well as taking any bits of leather they could find and trying to eat that because they were so hungry. So they had nothing to eat. They tried to, they stayed alive by basically trading with Native Americans and eating anything that could just hold them over while, they were starving. So essentially, researchers from the Smithsonian, they found evidence of a 14-year-old girl who was eaten. And the reason why they say that she was eaten is because of some of the kind of butcher marks on her bones, where it was shown that they cracked open her skull, took out the brain, took,
The sweet bits.
which I'm pretty sure if you eat someone's brain, you get something similar to mad cow disease.
Yes, folks.
So,
in
Probably
simpler
not great.
times, we like to call this forbidden soup.
Oh, nice. So here's the thing, the silver lining. They don't know how she died, so she could have died on her own,
And then they hacked into her corpse.
and then they hacked into it. How she probably died was either starvation or murder, but we don't know that That's just purely speculation,
They killed her.
probably. But, you know, there's no proof of it. There's just proof that they ate her.
So, if baby cow is tender compared to a grown-up cow in the form, it's veal. Veal is, so is a child more tender than... We're not going to answer that, folks. That's just getting a little too weird.
Okay, it is getting pretty weird, but I'd assume so. I've never tried long pork, but, I would kind of assume so.
Okay,
Right.
folks.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we actually went a little back in time. I think I took it back to the 1940s. But unfortunately, cannibalism is still wild and rampant in certain aspects as well.
Yeah.
Especially with a lot of psychotic serial killers. Some of them are actually doing this as well. But one of the biggest cases that I also just wanted to mention was back in 1972 with the Hungarian rugby team that crashed
Andes
in
Mountains.
the Andes
Oh, yeah.
Mountains.
Didn't they just make a
Folks,
documentary?
there is a
It
movie
was-
on that called Alive.
And I believe there is a documentary
There
that
is.
did also come out not too long ago too. But 16 survivors basically survived 2 months out in the Andes by eating the
Yeah.
meat of their comrades.
At least I can say in their situation too, the meat was preserved in snow, so it wasn't like really rotting per se, because they could actually pack the meat and make it more like like a freezer, if you will, just by putting the bodies in the snow. But you gotta do what you gotta do. Like I said, folks, the will to survive, for me anyway. I mean, I don't know if everybody feels that way. I gotta assume you'd rather eat a human than just hole up and die. The only exception to that rule is maybe like if it's a family member, because that's got to be harder. So like I look back to the Donner Party, and I almost think that's rougher because you're eating people you knew, right?
Well, that's almost like the same for the city of Leningrad.
Like, who gives a damn about the pilot, right? I didn't know him in life. Sure, shave off a piece of like knee or
Well, think
calf or
Jamestown.
whatever, but
I mean, imagine traveling across the world with these people. It takes months to get there. Now you're surviving there for a while, and then you start starving, and I mean, that must have been terrible. Absolutely terrible. To travel with people, to really get to know them, and then get into a position where you have to eat them to survive. That sucks. This episode is sad. I'm sorry.
should we
guys.
also talk about chickens and auto cannibalism?
I don't know, should we?
No. I think things got weird enough on this episode, folks. Marinate with what we've talked to you about. Maybe watch this episode, have a snack, possibly a steak, while you're ripping into the flesh and tearing into the bloody meat. Let our words soak in and decide for yourselves if it's only steak for you, if you could go to the forbidden soup or the other white meat. Just make that decision for yourselves and be grateful you have a supermarket down the street if you have one. Maybe you can take a little short trip to one, but food is generally available in abundance, provided you have the money and means to be able to purchase it.
And just hope they're being honest with where their meat comes from.
You know, I think we're gonna have to end off this episode because I'm getting hungry. So
And on that, we actually have another podcast coming up where we're going to eat a whole bunch of chips. We're going to binge on chips.
I was made for this.
The only one I'm worried about is the frickin' pickle because I hate pickle flavored frickin' everything.
No spoilers.
Guys, I'm not a big fan of flavored things, especially chips.
You will
so
eat our chips.
I'm not going to be given a choice, but I'm going to suffer. They're going to enjoy it. I'm going to suffer, but it is what it is.
Oh no, we have
Anyway.
to eat chips.
We're going to shoot one more episode, though, before we do the chips. The next episode, little slight tease for what you'll be watching next week, will be about sleep terrors and sleep paralysis. So stay tuned for that, and we'll catch you on the next one, folks.
Bye guys.
Later.
Later.